What's up, guys? So recently Lenovo announced their latest addition to their gaming lineup with the LOQ series of products. And this is the LOQ15. It is a great entry-level laptop that allows gamers to get into Lenovo's ecosystem without having to spend the additional money on, let's say, a Legion 5 Pro. But does Lenovo sacrifice too much with the LOQ15, or is it the perfect entry-level gaming laptop? Let's find out. So first, let's talk specs. So this particular model of the LOQ15 comes with an NVIDIA RTX 4050 with 6 gigs of VRAM, but you can spec that up to a 4060. For our CPU, we get the Ryzen 7 7840HS, which is a 8-core 16-thread CPU with a 3.8 gigahertz base clock and a 5.1 gigahertz boost clock. And if you're looking for more of an Intel-based machine, you can get a Intel i7-13700H in this machine. Now for RAM, this particular model has a single DIMM of 8 gigabytes, 5200 megahertz memory, but of course you can spec that up to 2x8 for 16 gigs of that DDR5, and it is user replaceable and upgradable, which is a really nice feature within this laptop. For storage, we're stuck with 512 gigabytes, but of course you can spec that up to a terabyte. And there's actually 2 NVMe SSD slots within this laptop for kind of endless user upgradability when it comes to storage. Now, the biggest differences or sacrifices with the Lenovo LOQ series of laptops versus that of the Legion is going to be the display technology and then the build materials of the laptop itself. So when it comes to the display on this machine, we get a 1920 by 1080p IPS display with 45% NTSC color coverage, 350 nit peak brightness, and 144 hertz refresh rate. So overall, not too shabby, and you're going to be able to take full advantage of that 1080p resolution and high refresh rate gameplay with the RTX 4050, where you probably won't be able to take full advantage of, let's say, a 2560 by 1440p display. And when it comes to the build materials, it's pretty much all plastic for this machine. So the top and the inside cover of the laptop are this kind of satin finish that almost resembles the aluminum look of the Legion series of laptops, but definitely doesn't feel metallic. It's not that cold to the touch, but it is a very, very nice finish. And the bottom underside of the laptop is more of a rough finished, but very much a hard plastic for the bottom cover that makes this thing feel super, super rigid, very, very little deck flex, even though this thing is not metal. And the other little detail I really like about the finishing of the LOQ15 is the light blue teal coloring of the heatsink on the back and the side of the device, and then the grill covers on the bottom. Just a nice little touch that kind of brings a pop of color to this laptop. So even with the plastic trade-off of the LOQ15 versus the aluminum chassis of a Legion 5 Pro, the weight and overall dimensions aren't too different. Overall, it's still a pretty big and bulky laptop, which leads me into the sponsor of this video, Ekster. Say goodbye to that big, bulky wallet and say hello to your new wallet from Ekster. And whether you're looking for that high-quality premium leather feel with the Parliament, or you're looking for a sleek, modern feel with the aluminum card holder, Ekster has you covered. And it can fit so many cards both in the sliding mechanism that makes card accessibility so great, as well as on the front and back of both devices. So you can fit up to like 6 or 7 cards within the sliding mechanism, really for your most important cards that you're using on the daily, that allows you to access them just with so much ease. And then with the Parliament, you have this folding flap that gives you more card access and an additional multi-purpose strap for your cash, and a back pocket perfect for the Ekster tracker, which makes tracking your wallet and your phone a breeze. And either one of these would make the perfect gift for dad, so let him unbox one of these on Father's Day using the link shop.ekster.com/techroundup or the code techroundup at checkout for up to 35% off your order up until June 20th. Now let's talk ports. So on the right side of the device, we have a USB Type-C 10 gigabit per second port and our microphone headphone combo jack. On the back of the device, we have our Lenovo proprietary power connector, our HDMI 2.1 port, an Ethernet port, and then 2 USB Type-A 10 gigabit per second ports. And then on the right side of the device, we have 1 USB Type-A 5 gigabit per second port and our physical camera shutter switch to shut off access to the camera. So overall, you have some really good port selection, some pretty good specs when it comes to the CPU and GPU hardware in this laptop, but how does it actually perform? So first things first, we're gonna run it through a quick Cinebench and Firmark test just to see how the temperatures are looking on this device, and then run it through a suite of games to check out how the game performance actually is on this entry-level machine.
So starting with temps, after 10 minutes of Cinebench and Firmark, we're looking at 70 degrees on the CPU and around 80 degrees on the GPU, and here's a listen to the fans. And now for the benchmarks, we went for more of like some different graphics intensive games. So F1 2022 for more of that really color accurate look. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 for more of that first person shooter that requires a little bit higher FPS. And then Cyberpunk 2077 for kind of that all in one, really beat down your computer. So with all those different titles, we're looking at an average FPS in F1 of 139, Call of Duty of 110, and Cyberpunk 2077 of 85, all at around high or balanced settings depending on the game. Really only Cyberpunk 2077 had a bit of a hiccup with that min of 8 FPS. Really just a lot of stuttering in that game. Not a lot, just some infrequent stutters. And with Cinebench R23, we're looking at a score of almost 16,000. So overall, the gameplay on the LOQ15 is really good. Like, the keyboard feels amazing, which we'll get into in a little bit. And overall, like, the screen quality, at least from a refresh rate standpoint, is really good. Some of the limitations when it comes to this machine is definitely going to be battery life. So I, of course, played this plugged in to get the highest performance possible. But you're only looking at a 60 watt-hour battery, which is definitely going to limit you in the amount of time that you can gain. And from a color accuracy perspective of this 45% NTSC color coverage panel, honestly, the colors are lacking a little bit of vibrancy. So if you look at our top screen, that's really a full quality IPS, and the bottom one is the laptop, and it's a lot brighter and more vibrant on that top screen.
So although the vibrancy and colors of the display aren't really the best, it's still very good for gaming. But what is also very good on this laptop is the keyboard and trackpad.
So for our keyboard and trackpad, starting things off with the trackpad, it's not a glass trackpad, but it still feels really nice, and it's also very large. And from a keyboard perspective, it's the same 1.5 millimeters of key travel that you get with your standard Legion keyboards as well. So very long key presses, very similar to like a mechanical keyboard feel within this laptop.
So this is the quality of the 1080p webcam and dual mic array. Overall, looks very good and is able to deal with a bunch of different variations in lighting within your room and your setup, and it also has some noise cancellation to get rid of some background noise if it is within the scene. Overall, pretty impressed by this 1080p setup.
So far, so good for this LOQ15. So, I mean, so far, the sacrifices that Lenovo has made haven't really outweighed the actual performance and the overall setup that you're getting with this laptop. But there's still one more thing to check with this LOQ15, and that is upgradability and repairability. So let's get under the hood.
So to disassemble this laptop is actually pretty simple. It's 10 screws for the first step. So you're removing all 10 screws, and there might be a little bit more screws than usual just because maybe this is the plastic chassis requiring a little bit more rigidity around the external surfaces or edges of this laptop. But then once you get all those screws out, you're just going to pop off the back plastic cover of the laptop in order to re-show 3 more screws. So you have 3 more screws to take off before you can get the bottom panel off. And of course, the bottom panel is plastic, which of course we went over at the start. Still is a very firm, hard plastic, which is good. So here is the internals of the machine. So you have that 60 watt-hour battery, and that gets charged by a 170 watt power brick. We also then get 2 downward firing speakers that do sound pretty good, as you heard in the games. Overall, we get the upgradable channels of SODIMM memory. So also coming with this typical standard within a laptop is like a shield to block EM frequencies, but they also use this to have some thermal pads on there to cool down your memory as well. But it is very nice to see that this is upgradable SODIMM memory versus soldered on to the motherboard. And for this particular LOQ laptop, and I'm pretty sure for all of them, we're looking at Samsung DDR5 running at 5200 megahertz. So very fast speeds on the memory, but with running this in single channel, if you do pick one of these up with dual channel 16 gigs of memory, you're probably going to see some nice performance uplift in games. And from a cooling perspective, you're looking at 3 heat pipes, looking like 3 for the GPU and then maybe 2 for the CPU or vice versa. But it does lead to those blue external ends to the heat pipe with the heatsink, which looks really cool from the outside. I don't know how it does with thermals. I don't think it really affects it very much, as we saw in the temperature testing, but it does look really, really good from the outside. We then also get access to our second M.2 slot, which covers over top this ribbon cable that leads to a little daughter board for USB, and then your standard SSD slot that's already filled with that 512 gig NVMe.
So overall, pretty impressive that you get to upgrade both your RAM, storage, and Wi-Fi within this machine. But now it's time to take a look and see how this thing compares to its closest sibling in the Legion 5 Pro with very, very similar specs. So it's time to see if the sacrifices that Lenovo has made with this machine make it worth a buy as an entry-level option to replace some of the lower-end SKUs of a Legion 5 Pro.
So comparing the LOQ to the Legion Pro, you're looking at right around $1,000 for the LOQ and $1,300 for the Legion Pro right now on Lenovo. So the LOQ does come with a better Ryzen 7 CPU with 8 cores and 16 threads versus the 6-core 12-thread Ryzen 5 that comes in the Legion 5 Pro. Then we both have the RTX 4050 graphics card and 16 gigs of DDR5 at least spec'd in this model. From a storage perspective, we're looking at 1 terabyte in this particular LOQ model versus 512 in the Legion Pro. And then for the display, this is the big difference. So it's the 15.6-inch Full HD 1920 by 1080 IPS panel with the 45% NTSC color coverage, 350 nit peak brightness, and 144 hertz refresh rate in the LOQ versus the 16-inch 2560 by 1600 IPS with 100% sRGB coverage, 300 nit peak brightness, and 165 hertz refresh rate for the Legion. Same camera microphone setup. The keyboard is similar in that you have the 1.5 millimeters of travel, but you have the RGB backlight on the Legion versus the white backlight on the LOQ, and then Wi-Fi 6 on the LOQ versus Wi-Fi 6E on the Legion.
Overall, I'm extremely impressed by the LOQ15. The 2 big negatives for me are definitely the lack of battery capacity, and of course that leads to a lack of battery life, as well as the underwhelming color coverage of this 45% NTSC 1920 by 1080p panel. But overall, the performance and build quality of this machine outweigh some of those disadvantages in terms of buying an entry-level machine. So overall, I definitely recommend this laptop. But if you want to spend a little bit more money and get yourself a Legion series laptop from Lenovo, you're definitely not going to lose any sleep spending a little bit more money and getting a little bit better build quality, some better screen and display options, as well as better internal specs. But either way, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Any questions or comments, leave those down below. If you haven't already, get subscribed to the channel. And I'll see you guys in the next one.